Well, thank you, and good evening. Welcome to Asia Society for what promises to be a very informative and enjoyable evening. For those of you who don't know me yet, I am Kyung-wha Kang, the new president, CEO of this great institution. Thank you. I am truly honored to be at the helm of Asia Society at this particular time in its mission to help navigate shared futures by deepening ties and understanding among the peoples and countries of Asia and the United States and others. And that mission is more important than ever as Asia steadily but surely becomes the center of global affairs, and this amidst heightened geopolitical tension in the region and around the world. It's been less than a month that I took on this role, and this is my first public event. And I'm just so honored and delighted that this, my first event, is to host President Jin Liqun, President of Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, in a conversation about the future of Asia's infrastructure. This is not President Jin's first appearance with us at Asia Society, and some of you may have been there in 2016 when President Jin and Kevin Rudd, my predecessor, gave us a very informative and hopeful outline of AIIB, just as the first China-led multilateral development bank was getting started. I think it was about 3 months into your job. And that was at our DC office of the Asia Society Policy Institute. President Jin is with us again, but this time here in New York, to reflect on AIIB's achievements during the past decade and to share his vision of infrastructure in the Asian region in the coming years. His bio, very impressive bio, is given to you in the leaflet that we've handed out to you, I believe, but let me just briefly summarize. President Jin Liqun is the inaugural president and chair of the board of directors at AIIB, and on January 20th, 2020, he was elected to serve a second 5 years, beginning in 2021, January. Before being elected bank president, he was in fact Secretary General of the Multilateral Interim Secretariat tasked with establishing the bank. So in effect, he gave birth to the bank, and now he's been leading it for the past 8 years. He has rich experience across private and public sectors and with the MDBs, the Multilateral Development Banks. He served as chair of China International Capital Corporation Limited, which was China's first joint venture investment bank, chair of the supervisory board of China Investment Corporation, and chair of the International Forum of Sovereign Wealth Funds. He had previously served in important key positions at the Asian Development Bank, as well as at the World Bank, and before that in the Chinese Ministry of Finance, rising up to the rank of vice minister. Unusual for a banker. Perhaps not, maybe I don't know enough about the banking world, but he holds a degree in English literature, and that passion for literature lives with him to this day. He has his English literature from the Beijing Institute of Foreign Languages, now Beijing Foreign Studies University, and was a Hubert Humphrey Fellow at the Economics Graduate Program at Boston University from 1987 to 1988. We will have President Jin giving us a few opening remarks first, and this will be followed by about a 30-minute conversation built around some questions that I will put to him to elicit some enlightened and enlightening responses. And that should leave us about 20-30 minutes for some of you in the audience to address questions to President Jin. So I now invite President Jin to the stage. I will wait for you there.
Dr. Kyung-wha Kang, President of Asian Society, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. First of all, congratulations, Dr. Kang, for taking over from Kevin Rudd. It's very important position. And I think under your leadership, Asian Society will be reaching out to the broad audience and contribute to the understanding of Asia by the rest of the world. I'm delighted to be back here after quite a number of years. And thanks for hosting me in this evening. It's a privilege to be with you all at one of the world's leading institutions of thought and research on Asian affairs. We have 75 minutes together this evening. Every minute counts. And so I will make some brief opening remarks before we then move into a moderated discussion and a Q&A. In January this year, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank entered its 9th year of operation. Founded in 2016, AIIB has grown rapidly. We began with 57 founding members. Today, we have 109 members, representing 81% of global population and 65% of global GDP. Next time I see you, our membership will be more than 100. AIIB is of the same gene pool of the Bretton Woods multilateral institutions created for the 21st century. This bank was created in direct response to a genuine desire among countries for greater international cooperation, anchored in a vision to foster sustainable economic and social development in Asia and beyond by investing in infrastructure and other productive sectors. We are the only MDB with global reach that is the majority owned by developing economies. One of the innovations behind this bank's governance is that our bank was structured to give developing members a larger voice within a framework that incentivizes consensus building. At the same time, the active involvement of this bank's developed economies has been critical to ensuring the high standards of this institution. This model has proved to be more successful than ever we could possibly imagine. As of today, we approved over $51 billion in infrastructure financing across 37 countries of our members for more than 260 projects. The transportation sector accounts for the largest share of financing at 28% of cumulative financing, energy 26%, water 12%, urban 8%, health 3%, digital 3%. In July 2023, we aligned fully with the Paris Agreement. Indeed, last year, 60% of our approved financing was directed towards climate mitigation and adaptation, up from 41% in 2020, well ahead of our 50% target. Furthermore, 44% of our approved projects incorporate meaningful gender-sensitive actions and indicators in their design, and this will continue to grow following the planned launch of a gender action plan later this year. In human terms, our financing has helped to provide 710 million people have been given access to urban mass transport, 22 million water users with improved irrigation and drainage infrastructure, 17.5 gigawatts of renewable generation capacity installed, approximately $893 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines have been procured with AIIB's financing, just to name a few indicators. One of my favorite projects is our Indonesian satellite project. This project saw us provide $150 million in financing to Jakarta-based telecoms company PT Satellite Nusantara Tiga to develop, launch, and operate a telecommunications satellite which provides internet access to 45 million people in the most remote parts of this country, empowering remote communities by connecting them with global markets and international opportunities. While AIIB has achieved a lot in 9 short years, and the speed of our financing growth is remarkable by historical comparisons, our achievements still are modest in comparison to our long-term established MDB peers. That is why partnership lies at the heart of this bank's business model. At a time when the world is calling on MDBs to do more for us to act together as a global system address the specter of wickedly interconnected global threats, I consider it bank's duty to work to strengthen our multilateral peers and a system we all depend upon for global progress. At this bank, collaboration is hard-coded into our DNA. Our bank is the largest co-financier of the World Bank and AIIB. Co-financing accounts for 50% of overall financing. Last year, we strengthened our partnership with the World Bank even further, with AIIB providing a credit guarantee over $1 billion of the World Bank's sovereign portfolio. This freed up $1 billion in new World Bank's financing, and in turn grew our portfolio of high-quality assets, allowing us to issue $350 million in new lending for our lower-income members. This is just the beginning. We are very ambitious about doing more with the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and others. As a sector, MDBs now must prioritize agility to deliver essential financing more quickly for those most in need. Our members deserve development, and unnecessary processing delays are unnecessary delays in arriving at a better tomorrow. When MDBs work together to make it easier for clients to work across multiple institutions, we unlock additional capacity on their side to focus on their citizens' development rather than completing duplicative administration and assessment. AIIB has learned a lot about partnership-powered development since our formation 9 years ago, one being that mutual recognition of standards is a no-brainer. We are doing our best to harmonize our procurement, environmental and social standards as quickly. More lending also requires a complementary push on project preparation. MDBs must work together to ensure that there are enough bankable projects to attract additional financing. Our bank is acting on the call here. Last week, with the World Bank, we launched a digital co-financing platform, cofinancing.org, that aims to improve the speed with which projects are matched with the technical, ground, and the financial resources needed to bring them to fruition. 10 MDBs have already signed on with 73 projects worth $65 billion listed, and we expect this number to grow quickly in what is another tangible example of MDBs working together better. Secondly, MDBs must work to mobilize a much larger coalition of financial institutions to raise standards and grow the pipeline of local projects that underpin our global drive towards sustainable future. To that end, AIIB will be hosting the Financing Commons Summit, the first in Asia, in October this year. This summit will gather together the world's public development bank representing $23 trillion in assets and 10% of total global investment flows. In project development, relationships and local knowledge matter. By working together, AIIBs and local public development banks can partner global standards and technical know-how with local knowledge of development opportunities and needs to improve accessibility to development finance for all. Solidarity among the AIIBs is at a level I have not seen in the last 40 years, since I first served on the World Bank board in 1980. When it comes to the multilateral system, togetherness, teamwork is our superpower. At a time when global geopolitical tensions and political fragmentation are on the rise, AIIBs are working together as an enduring counterbalance for continued cooperation toward a better future, a better tomorrow. Thank you all very much. I look forward to discussions to come. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, President Jin, for that very comprehensive but also very upbeat assessment of the first 8 years of AIIB's work. And you're just coming from the World Bank IMF meetings where the reform of the MDBs have been long on the agenda for many years. I see it as being driven by two calls. One, for a greater financing for the climate agenda, and two, a call for a bold reform, even a structural reform of the existing multi-development banks to be more inclusive, to be more representative, to be more responsive and accessible. And I think, indeed, one could argue that part of the motivation that led to the creation of AIIB was that growing dissatisfaction with the existing MDBs. And I think in 2016, I saw your talk, and on this issue, you said the gene of the MDBs needs some positive mutation. I thought that was a very interesting way to frame the challenge. But I think that thought has caught on because certainly it is the global agenda, not just at the banks, but also at the UN. I think it's one of the big agenda items going into the Secretary General's Summit of the Future that will be convened at the G8 this coming year. So you must feel a bit vindicated because what you represent to a certain extent that change that was needed from the development banks. And so your voice, I would assume, carries a particular weight in the discussions. I've checked the World Bank website over the weekend to see what's happening, and I could see that there is indeed a lot of steps being taken to bring greater coherence among the banks, greater collaboration, streamlining of the processes, and that's all nice. And you mentioned some of that in your presentation so far. But I also see some still discussions, I think especially among the G24 of the developing countries. And also there's so many arenas where this is being discussed, but there's a G20 expert group led by Larry Summers and another eminent scholar.
And K. Singh.
Yes, Singh. And there's this great that progress is happening at the policy level, at the headquarters level, but at the country level, a great deal of distraction. I think that there's a lot to be done to bring about country level coordination among the banks. And at the end, that's where things count, making real differences for the people. Can you reflect on your thoughts on this ongoing challenge?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me try to focus on a couple points which I think are relevant to this bank and to MDBs as a family. First of all, question: why should we have a new multilateral development bank when we had World Bank, AIIB, EBRD? Virtually, we have the global development bank in World Bank and all the regional development banks. Mm-hmm. Why should we have a new one? Secondly, is this new one going to cooperate or partner with the existing MDBs? Or, as some people suspected, would undercut the existing institutions by unfair competition, racing to the bottom, reduce the standards so that it would be more attractive to the client countries. Something of that kind. I think questions were raised. I fully understand. First question: we believe, all the founding members believe, that while the World Bank and all those development banks which were patterned on the Bretton Woods institutions in the ensuing years were doing a wonderful job. Mm-hmm. They've been doing a wonderful job. China has benefited substantially from the support of the World Bank, AIIB. They're doing wonderful jobs. But in the new era, there are lots of things which calls for the strengthened support from MDBs. In that respect, I would say it's not enough for the existing institutions to meet the needs. Mm-hmm. Some people often ask the question, is there going to be increased competition? I would say the development need is so vast, so much so, you do not have any worries about a competition. We have been busy working together, okay, supporting client countries in dealing with global challenges, climate change mitigation, adaptation, poverty reduction, connectivity, regional economic, global integration. Lots of things we need to do. And I don't think why they should be competing, particularly why should be racing to the bottom. It's not something like that. Now, 8 years into operation, everybody in the MDB family convinced that this is very important for us to work together. So on Saturday, the heads of MDBs had the first retreat. We spent half a day discussing the critical issues, capital adequacy, how the MDBs can work effectively, how could we deal with the global challenges. Literally, the heads of MDBs lay their heads together, dealing with the global challenge. And actually, the previous night, I had dinner with a veteran development bank's leader, former very senior people in the World Bank. And he asked me, and what are you going to do tomorrow, Saturday? I said, we are going to have this meeting. He found it's very interesting. Pleasantly surprised to see that heads of MDBs will sit together discussing the approaches dealing with global challenge. Because in those days, all of these institutions work individually. They did not talk to each other, right? Now, completely changed. Why? Because of the global challenge, because of the global need for these institutions to work together. And then that will bring us the issue of what you mentioned, reform. Reform is a must for all of those institutions with history. But I would say reform is important for any institution on the course of development. Don't wait too long when you wake up one day to say, hey, we need to reform. Don't do that. But this bank is actually the product of the reform. Because when the 57 countries came together to negotiate the Articles Agreement, we had a lot of ideas coming from the experience of the existing multilateral development banks. And also to learn from their experience, we came up with some of the ideas how this bank should be a little bit different from the existing institutions so that we can fit into the new era of the 21st century. So we remain in the gene pool of MDBs, but we are a new kid on the block with new features. If we are a clone
Yes.
of the World Bank, if we are a copy of the ADB, that doesn't make any sense, right?
You've laid the seed for the positive mutation of the system.
That's the gene mutation.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So are the other banks becoming more like you in this process? Because you're a product of the early 20th century, and they're a product of six decades ago.
I remain humble. I cannot say they follow us. That is, I think that's probably the misstatement. I can say we learn from them.
Yes.
We pick up all those upsides, and with a little bit our innovative, creative thing, and our peers think, wow, this is wonderful, because they see their own image in it.
Yes.
But they also see something new. Can I draw an analogy? It's just like a young couple, and they have a baby. And they, oh, what a lovely baby, so cute. They see this likes father, this likes mother. But this baby is more beautiful. They should be proud of it.
Well, I think babies are cute, period. And you've given us an impressive list of numbers. It's 10 million people benefiting from your investments in urban transportation. The Indonesian, I believe, the telecommunication satellite, 45 million benefiting from the internet connection from there. So lots of successes, but I have to ask, there have been some disappointments and failures along the way.
Disappointments are not avoidable, right?
Yes, right.
Give you one example. In Indonesia, I think I blame this on hay fever.
Let
me see. No, it's okay. We did a project called Mandalika.
Yes.
Mandalika. Mandalika project is to improve and develop a tourist site and also a convention center on an island to relieve a lot of pressure on Bali. This is a wonderful idea. And the project would improve the livelihood of the local people. Once it becomes a tourist destination, becomes the convention center, definitely jobs would be created. Women would be employed. Children would have a better schools in the future. It's a wonderful one. And then we had some problems with some of the local people. And they complain they are not properly, adequately compensated for the resettlement. And we discovered that actually these people they do not live in the area where we finance the project. They are not affected by this project. They're outside. So we are taking care of these people. Even though they do not live in the areas which is our project proper, we still want to help, sharing information with the government to see how they could be properly taken care of. We spend quite a lot of money sending delegations over there, missions over there to see how their complaints could be addressed. So I would say even it's not our responsibility, we take care of them, right? But So some of the local people in our project area have debated with them because they love it. They are taken care of. They see the future. So you see, development is a good thing, but sometimes you cannot avoid some of the so-called disappointments. You cannot avoid. There are some other kind of issues. I would say I'm disappointed, not the people disappointed. You know why? We want to work with EBRD, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, in developing a hydropower project called Nanskra in Georgia. Everybody knows hydropower is green, renewable energy. And the hydropower is located in that area, which will not create problems for aquaculture, fish, or whatever. How many families would be affected? 85. How many families would have to be relocated? 5. But because of some groups' strong opposition, the project has been pigeonholed for the last 10 years. Couldn't do. Now, I'm disappointed because we need renewable energy. I certainly care about the people who might be adversely affected. But if there are 85 families or 5 families even though, could we try to persuade them to think in terms of the broader public interest rather than the very narrow interest of themselves? Now, this is an issue. I don't think you should do something in a way which would make them feel uncomfortable, but dialogues, reasonable conversations could probably help. I still hope this project would be financed.
Yep, I think sufficient consultation with the population to be affected is one of the key principles of development, and I think this is what's it's giving you such frustration as the banker behind this, but also I think the time that this is taking to get off the ground. But without that sufficient consultation, you start on very shaky grounds. It could cause you problems further down the road. So you want to make sure that that fundamental foundation is taken care of. And I think this perhaps reflects my background in the UN, where this is a very important principle to in every field that we go to. But so lots of successes project-wise, and I think I was going to ask you, so your ambition starting out in 2016, has that ambition been accomplished, fulfilled? In terms of the work, but as an institution, you also said you wanted this to be clean, lean, and green.
Clean and green.
Clean, lean, and green, and also that a very good corporate culture from day one, and to maintain that for the organization in terms of the work, in terms of your relationship with the board members, and all of that. And how satisfied are you 8 years later that this is indeed the case?
I can say we have been on the right track. Okay. For us, achievement, accomplishment, or any such nice words is too early for us to pronounce. We are just beginning. Yes, we certainly achieved something. It's a credit to all of the shareholders, to the board of governors, to the board of directors who guide us. And I can say it's a credit to the management team as a whole, right? So we have making progress, and we are on track. But when we look forward, there's so many things for us to do. And each time, for instance, like during the IMF World Bank meetings, when the ministers talk to me, I find sometimes a little bit, guilty that we cannot meet their needs according to their timetable. Right. We have how many people? 600. Less than 600. But we have 109 members. And particularly, quite a number of countries are very small for Pacific Island countries. It is not easy to support a regular project. We don't have concessional funding like AIIB and World Bank. So I feel bad when they come to me. I also say I'm really sorry. I could not move fast enough to work with you, solve your problems, right? So we need to work hard. I would prefer not to look at achievements. I prefer to look at what we have yet to achieve.
Wow. 8 years.
8 years.
Yeah, still early, a young age for an institution, multilateral institution. But it also happens that these 8 years have been a period of great turbulence, geopolitically, geoeconomically. I think the rising, heightening, however, intensifying rivalry in trade to begin with, and it expanded to technology, security, and foreign policy between the two big powers, the United States, China. That is the overriding geopolitical context. We've also had COVID-19, which just stopped everything, especially hurting the economies of the world, and killed over 7 million people, as I recall it. And then, we realize in that midst, there's a fundamental, very painful limitations as to the international cooperation that is very much needed to deal with such, sudden hitting public health crisis that the pandemic was. So as if that wasn't enough, we now have big wars happening in Ukraine and Gaza. Many fragile states have plunged back into violence. In Asia, we see that happening in Myanmar. And of course, the extreme climate change-induced extreme weather patterns. Record-breaking heat waves, flooding in so many countries, and I think there's terrible floods in Guangdong in China currently unfolding at this place. So, it says as a curse that may you live in interesting times, but our times are too interesting. And so it's beyond interesting, it's concerning, it's sobering, it's even frightening at some point. But you have navigated these 8 years and with much accomplishments, with humility, and always looking to the future. How has the bank navigated these difficult times? How has your member states' dynamics, as it expanded from 57 to 109, and has that been a plus or a difficulty as AIIB grew through these 8 years?
Thank you. The points you made will lead me to discuss 2 or 3 things. First, you referred to pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, which is unfortunately the cause of quite a lot of people who left this world earlier than they should. And then this bank was also navigating the rough and tumble geopolitical situations over the last 8 years. I think difficulty is routine. You should not expect things smooth sailing every day. I think smooth sailing is the exception rather than the norm. It's exception, okay? Every day you are dealing with difficulties. As an institution, we must be agile enough, we must be adaptive, we must be responsive. And then we find the Alice Agreement, which we designed, was really very much helpful. When COVID-19 hit, I remember in the Spring Festival days of 2020, because it broke out in 2019, right?
At late 2019.
Yeah, and I was a lot of people will stay at home, right? They cannot come together. And then we called Zoom meetings and discussed this with my senior management members. I said, hey, now this is something which happened out of the blue. What are we going to do? Because no government could focus on infrastructure development projects. Are we going to wait here? How long? 6 months, 1 year? We have no idea. I said, we have to do something about it. And we identify healthcare system as the new target. We need to provide support to those countries which are struggling. Of course, masks are important, right? Vaccines are important. But we look at the fundamental challenge faced by many low-income countries. Their healthcare system is the weakest link on the chain. So we discussed this and quickly put together a crisis recovery facility. Initially, it's small, but later on, we end up having $1.8 billion. So instead of doing nothing, waiting for the COVID-19 to disappear on their own, we started to help those countries, including China, okay, to deal with the COVID-19. And the issue is, yours is supposed to be a bank working on investment in infrastructure. I don't know what you are going to do have anything to do with this. I said, no, wait a moment. If you look at our artist agreement, the bank's mandate is to promote broad-based economic social development through investment in infrastructure and other productive sectors. Indeed, when we discussed the artist agreement, some of the negotiators asked Mr. Jin, what do you mean by other productive sectors? We suppose we are discussing the bank investing in infrastructure. What do you mean by? What is other productive sectors? And I said, other productive sectors is other productive sectors. And then when we finance healthcare system, now my point is, only a healthy nation is productive. So healthcare is productive sector. And then we worked on the healthcare projects. Meanwhile, COVID-19 mutates, right? And their toxicity goes down. We can come out again, work together, going back to the mainstream business of infrastructure investment. That means a bank must be agile, adaptive, and be creative, right? So this is the way, I would say, how we deal with some of the challenges. You have to be creative, not too rigid, right? And then how about geopolitical challenges? Certainly, it will have implications for the multilateral development banks, but we manage to deal with the common challenges. Okay. Many countries could have their own issues dealing with their bilateral issues or whatever. But our idea is to draw people's attention to focus on the common ground, on the common challenges. And if you think about this is important, dealing with climate change mitigation, adaptation. And then how about the other disputes? Could we leave it aside for a moment? Let's solve the problems. So I believe when human society is faced with the main threat of climate change, which is a clear and a present danger, we should forgive each other. Don't be involved. Don't be bogged down in these kind of disputes. Be more tolerable and focus on something which can really help the human society. I think that's very, very important. And then you refer to, let's say everybody's talking about climate change. Climate change means that the weather would be more erratic.
Yes.
Climate would be more erratic. We often refer to natural disaster. Natural, for flooding, hit Pakistan, hit Bangkok. Okay, this time Hong Kong and Guangdong were hit. And Germany were hit by flooding. So I said, actually, many natural disasters are not really natural. It's natural at its face value, but it's more or less induced by human behavior. It's essentially anthropogenic. So do not take the so-called natural disaster at its face value. It's man-made. Ultimately, that's why we need to deal with this as the common threat to humans.
And I guess as you deal with these issues of climate change and the pandemic, your concept of infrastructure also evolves. I think we understand infrastructure as these hardware, the roads, the ports, the train networks, and communication networks. But you've now embraced the public health infrastructure as part of your mandate. When you spoke in 2016, you also said you were a little fuzzy about digital connectivity, whether that was infrastructure or not, but clearly it is. It is. And in that regard, I think the AI challenge is enormous. It's the technology is running way ahead of our ability to understand its full potential. And I think that's almost an existential question for humanity, because the technocrats, the techtopia types would say, oh, this will solve all the problems and human beings will have a good life just on top of the technological accomplishment. But the humanities side would say, wait a minute, we're forgetting the human side of this. And you are not just a development banker, but deeply rooted in a humanities culture. What are your thoughts on the challenges of AI?
First of all, infrastructure in our bank is defined in a very broad manner. Digital infrastructure is clearly infrastructure. As I said, a satellite project for Indonesia can provide internet connection for 40 million people. Of course, AI in the new era could be a benefit to the humans, but it could also be a new challenge. I think so. Any new technology is beneficial unless it's abused by some of the people with evil motivation. How can we solve this problem? I think, first of all, any national government, sovereign government, must take this very seriously. If we say, okay, you need finance, okay, you need banks or something every day, you cannot imagine there's no banking regulation. You cannot imagine the finance can just go anywhere without some of the necessary monitoring or constraints. Otherwise, it's like flooding, Likewise, AI, sovereign governments should have some regulatory policies. But it's not enough, because AI knows no national boundaries. This actually calls for all of the sovereign governments to sit down and discuss, harmonize the regulatory policies. In so doing, you can have the AI to produce maximum benefit for the people without creating devastating effects, consequences in the future. I don't think we should be worried about the so-called unintended consequences of AI. We should be worried about the lack of cooperation among the sovereign governments.
Well said. I think there is an attempt at that around the UN. I think groupings of countries talking this, but we have yet to come up with a norm that brings the international community together on this challenge. So I myself personally worried where this could lead to, but well, that's for another time. But I think, one of the region-wide challenge for Asia as we look to the future of infrastructure in the broader sense is the, surprisingly quickly dropping fertility rates all over the continent. Even India, I understand, is now under the replacement rate of 2.1%. And that has huge economic implications, what infrastructure initiatives that government needs to be looking at. Is that a challenge for you? Is that something that AIIB should also put its mind and resources to?
While this is not our immediate problem, I think this aging population, aging issue, or lower fertility rate should be taken very seriously. I would say over the long term, this could be considered a development issue. Could it be considered a development issue? Looking back, we find many low-income countries usually have very high fertility rate because in spite of the infant mortality, which could be high, but the people do not feel secure when they grow old. So they want to have more children to take care of them. Whether the children will take care of them or not, that's a different matter. But they just want to have more children, right? So you have the big family. Humans are the most important productive resources, but only when humans receive education. Any kid being born is not a natural productive resource. They have to receive education. So when a nation is poor and have lots of young people, they will find they are lacking in financial resources to help these people. And then you will find over the last maybe half a century, you see many low-income countries' population is increasing, and then you have a very young population. Average age is very low. China, because of its fast growth over the last 4 decades, quickly find it's becoming aging, right? And also, the young people today are not very keen on raising kids, right? So my view is learning from the lessons of the developed countries and many emerging market economies. In China, it took China 27 years to reach the aging population ratio,
Yes.
which took European countries more than 100 years.
Yes.
And it will be even faster for countries like India, the Philippines, these countries. The more young people you have today, the worse situation you will face
Quicker.
decades later.
Yeah.
I think this is a very much important issue. Now, how to deal with that? Development is important. But when a country develops faster, the problem could be eased, right? And AI, in my view, could solve some of the problems because a lot of work could be done by the robots. I think in the future, the nursing homes would need more robots than human nurses. Okay, you can solve the problem. I think the problem could be mitigated by new technology. But more importantly, in my view, the government should be prepared for the aging society, for the so-called gray wave, the aging, by strengthening the healthcare system, by streamline or the economic structure so that the economy could be more resilient dealing with these kind of challenges. Developed countries are exploring, ways to deal with that. and we follow this. And China is working very hard to allocate more resources for social sector. Okay, this is very much important. And China is investing more in developing hospitals and nursing homes so that people would be taken care of. Now, for most of the families, if they have one sick parent or grandparent, even you hire one domestic helper, they cannot solve this problem. But when they are in the nursing home, the nurses could be more productive. They can take care of more. So I think this is a very, very important issue. We have to take care of.
Really big challenge for many
governments. I think to make the matter worse, because you see, on the one hand, the fertility rate is dropping. On the other hand, the longevity is increasing, right? They are going to different ways. And very interesting, you'll find, because of the internet, because of this new era, I think the young people seem to be talking to each other across the world. When the Chinese people don't want to get married, India say, hey, we behave like that. Indian young people don't like to do that. Koreans.
Yes.
Koreans.
We have the lowest in the world in terms of fertility.
And they want to look at, oh my goodness, these young people, which country? Oh, they just think like us.
The MZ generation, we call them. And there's a global mentality to the MZ generation, and not having kids, I think, is a very common one of them, my kids included. But I would like to leave some time for questions from the audience. It's hard to see who's there, and I'm being new to this situation for the first time. I might not be as good as my predecessor has been, but let's see, a couple of hands. Let's start from the one that in the young lady on the yes. Yes.
Hi, I'm Yue, graduated from Columbia, now doing research on sustainable finance from China to other part of the world. It was nice seeing you, and I am asking a question about your prospect for China's future investment into overseas. So because we all know, like, China has been seen as an alternative financer for the developing countries, and it has been trying to do the unconditional loans, like the concessional loans, but also in a commercial way of mindset. But it peaked in like 2016 to 2019, and then we see like the severe drop of the Chinese development financing to other parts. So what would be your understanding in the next maybe few 20 years or like 30 years? And also SICA was built in 2018. Would you see China putting more efforts into the bilateral side or being involved more into the multilateral development side, like in AIIB? Thank you so much.
Would you like to take it one-on-one?
Okay.
Yes.
I think
yes.
I'll take maybe a couple more questions.
Yes, the young lady in the second row, please. And I'll take one more. I'll take three.
Hi, thank you for a very interesting discussion. I have a question regarding food insecurity. Zero hunger is SDG goal number 2, Sustainable Development Goal number 2. And in my view, a hungry nation cannot develop. So to what extent is food, nutrition, and food system re-engineering considered infrastructure with your bank? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. One more. We'll take one from the gentleman in the middle.
Thank you so much, President Jin. My name is Wei Shin. I'm currently working for the United Nations. You actually mentioned that AIIB currently lack concessional financing. And I was wondering, is there any intention to actually, for AIIB to get into concessional financing, blended finance, or even grants? And if so, what would that be different from AIDA or IBRD? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me answer the question. First of all, I'm sorry. I cannot speak on behalf of the Chinese government. Okay, I cannot do that. But I can share with you some of my observation. You will find from the recent third Belt Road Summit, right? China will continue to support many countries in the world, developing world, who needs support. And the Belt Road is one of the efforts to help them getting connected. And the Chinese government's idea is to focus on high quality Belt Road projects, taking care of environment, social issues, and anti-corruption. So the idea is, in my view, they would like to achieve higher quality development projects. So even though it's kind of infrastructure development in those countries, some kind of a bilateral support is already, embedded in it, right? And to say nothing of the fact that China also provides concession of funding to many African countries, their right of the debt. I'm sure with the Chinese economy continue to grow, China would continue to provide financial support to many developing countries. China would go on two legs, bilateral and now multilateral, supporting, for instance, either for World Bank, ADF for ADB. When I joined the World Bank in 1980, China got the first AIIB project for education. But in 20 years' time, China graduated. And 3 years later, China became a contributor. But can you believe if many developing countries which benefit from the World Bank ADB could do the same as China, what kind of support we could have from all those countries? So I think it's very much important. And then why should China initiate this bank? This is to indicate that China would also work on multilateral, so walking on two legs, bilateral, multilateral. And the question about food security, it's very much important. And as you know, the impact of the war has implications for supplies of grain to some of the countries who are our members, Jordan, Egypt, and to say nothing of the fact that many African countries are vulnerable to food shortage. Can we do that? Yes. What kind of infrastructure? Other productive sectors. We can do that. But we may do it in a different way. Instead of directly putting money in growing grains or something, we can improve the agricultural infrastructure, irrigation, and a modern agriculture. You could have a building, 50-storied, and you walk into a building. It's a farm. It's a farm. And if you capture carbon dioxide and put this carbon dioxide into these greenhouses in the building, you'll find the plants grow like wild, right?
Yeah, I've seen
so
some of those.
This is kind of new thing. So we do not need so much farmland in the future. All these buildings like New York, you walk into it, not chicken farm, and it could be a vegetable farm, and it could be all that kind of things. If you look at what some of these countries have been doing, they are already doing that. You find, for instance, in Thailand, you walk into a building. It's not an office building. It's a chicken farm. So I think food security is not a problem as long as we work on it to improve the basic infrastructure and to be innovative. Concession of funding. We did not design this bank to be a multilateral development institution with hard loan, soft loan. But later on, we find it is very much helpful if we could have a little bit concession of funding. So we mobilized some resources to help the low-income countries to prepare project preparation. It's grant, and reduce the cost. And we have now set up a soft fund window to get concessional funding contributed voluntarily by the members. It's different from AIIB, from ADF, because AIIB money would be financed poverty reduction projects. We don't do that. We use this concessional funding to buy down the interest rate of the infrastructure projects. It's not direct dealing intervention in poverty reduction. For instance, a low-income country need a road, but they cannot afford the cost of the interest rates. So we give them the money, just a little bit of money, to reduce the cost. The road could be done, which could otherwise be impossible to finance.
They're creative.
And this is much better.
Yep.
So as we often say, don't just give some people who are hungry, a fish. Teach them how to fish. This is exactly what we teach them how to fish, rather than just to give them some food, eke out a living today. Right?
You mentioned briefly about the Chinese economy. And I don't want to dwell on this too long because I want to give another round to the audience, but all through last year, there was lots of doomsaying about the Chinese economy. But in the end, it achieved 5% growth. I think it's doing a little bit better during the first months of this year. In 2016, you said all these doomsayers about the Chinese economy, they come and go, and all predicted to be wrong in the end. But the challenges this time seems to be a little bit more serious and structural than the past rounds of economic difficulties. What's your prognosis?
Interesting. In 1997, when Asian countries were hit by the Asian financial crisis, you remember, the Economist has a cover, the sinking Titanic. This is China, which means Chinese government would sink. And I was invited to speak in London and organized by the Economist, the magazine Economist. And I said, if you want to predict, don't predict what China would be, because 100% you will be wrong. China is a country which defies prediction. Can you tell me, you have lots of people, can you tell me anyone soothsayer about China who is correct? Zero. Never, ever got it right.
Why is that?
Why is that? Two reasons. Some people who don't feel comfortable predicting or seeing China is getting better, they would predict according to what they wish to see, not according to what it could actually be. This is wishful thinking becomes the soothsayers. So it's very dangerous. Secondly, people, quite innocent, have no bad intentions. You know why they predict it wrong, get it wrong? First of all, they don't understand China's unique system, which is very resilient. I will say resilience seems to be a word very much abused these days, right? Overused. But China is really resilient because most of the countries don't see how China works. They don't really know. And they would come to conclusion based on their experience, not about China. How about this year, next year? And I'm fully optimistic about Chinese development. If you look at the series of reform measures and policies published by the Chinese government, you have every reason to be confident. China certainly would also sometimes have a little bit, volatility, but overall.
All right, I think I will have one last round. Brief questions, brief responses before I give you the final say. Let's go to the gentleman in the back with your hand raised, I think. Yes.
Thank you.
Short questions, please.
Sure, short question. You mentioned that the goal is to have productive development. I wonder, like, what is your framework for productive? Like, I understand you have social goal, and do you consider productive as in a investment perspective, productive? Thank you.
Okay, there's one. The gentleman in the third row. Yes, I can't see you, but yes.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Ali Nasir Mohammed. I am the Maldives ambassador to the United Nations. I recently co-chaired a process to negotiate outcome document for the small island developing states. The UN Conference on Small Island Developing States, we call SIDS, is going to be held in Antigua late May. Now, one of the key concerns of the SIDS is climate finance and access to finance. And reform in the MDBs and IFIs have been a long-held agenda of the SIDS. The SIDS community, some of which include in my own country, the Maldives, is a member of the AIIB from the very beginning. What they are looking for from the international financial institutions and MDBs, which includes AIIB, is number one, climate finance at an affordable rate. Number two is easier access to development finance, bringing down the cost of borrowing. Now, Mr. President, you said resilience is overused. For the SIDS, resilience is never overused because that is what they do. In everything they do, it has to be resilient because of the danger that they face from climate change. My question is, what's AIIB's I hope my question is not causing any difficulty for you, Mr. President.
I think therefore you should be kind.
I'm waiting for the question.
Okay, one last question from. I will give it to the young lady on the fourth floor, fourth row, please. Yes.
Mine is super short. My name is Valentina. My question is, the World Bank's new president, Ajay, recently had this new goal of reducing the project approval process from 19 months by 6 months by the middle of next year. I was curious about what's the average length of getting a project approved at AIIB, and if you had any, I guess, also similar goals of reducing and improving efficiency. Thanks.
Thank you. First, with regard to productive sectors, if I understand the question correctly, I think we should, again, define productive sectors very, very broadly, not too narrow. As I said, to deal with the food security. Mm-hmm. What has this to do with infrastructure? Of course. Now, social infrastructure is important. And I believe social infrastructure certainly could be considered productive sector because infrastructure itself is productive sector, right? But if we are too narrow in defining infrastructure, probably we would not be possible to do a lot of things which we need. And what's going to happen in the future, we don't know. Future is something which you never know. So leave some space for your activities. You don't even know what you are going to do in the future. I think the best way for any development bank is to leave room for something to do when they're called upon to do it, right? So that's why I would say it's very much important for us to know where is the need. And then if there's such a need for development banks to do, they should. Now, small island countries is really a big, big challenge for us. You know why? Because they're small and they do not enjoy the economy of the scale. But the people in the Pacific Island countries, for instance, have to deal with the impact of climate change and the consequences of climate change, most, I would say, serious for those countries. That's why we are working on some of the new approaches to deal with the Pacific Island countries. For instance, by working with Australia and New Zealand, they have some concessional funding, and we work together. As I said, instead of giving the concessional funding to some projects which seems to be characterized put in the category of poverty reduction, we should try to do it in a way which reduce the costs of basic infrastructure projects. But Pacific Island countries and many island countries will be faced with the consequence of climate change, and there could be different ways to deal with that. To my knowledge, it's not a perfect answer, but Australia and New Zealand are helping to take some of the people, have them settle down, if the particular country is really in yeah. So I would say international cooperation is needed. RJ said he wanted to reduce the project preparation from 19 months and to cut it down to maybe 12, even less. I admire him. I think because people complain about a long project preparation period, and people often critical of the World Bank in this regard. I have to put in some fair words for the World Bank. Indeed, the project's complexity would determine the time needed for preparing a project. I think RJ talks about the average time. It does not mean that every project should go that way. It's not possible. Now, we are fast. We are faster because we take the shovel-ready projects. So we are fast, okay. But sometimes the World Bank prepare a project, hydropower project, you need years of studies, environmental assessment, social study. That is really, I think, a protracted, process. My view is, on average, probably we really need to get a project done in one year's time, which means from identification to the conclusion of negotiation, the start to disperse, 1 year. I think it's possible. But we are not commercial banks. Commercial banks never need that time, right? But we're a development bank. But still, probably we need to take up some of the tough projects. We need to have a little bit more time to prepare so that the projects finally could be considered when things are ready. So I think it's a laudable efforts by RJ, but I think things are very much different, right?
Well, I think the World Bank's mandate is so much broader than your mandate, and that's reflected in the speed with which you get things done. But we're way beyond our allocated time, and I'm sorry I've gone. And I wanted to ask you for a final say to sum up everything that you've said to us, and you're an admirer of Shakespeare, a Shakespearean quotation or a line from your favorite poetry, but an adage. But how would you summarize your sense and your optimism and your positivism in this very difficult global geopolitical, geoeconomic times?
I give you 3 quotes.
Not just 1, 3.
One, from Irish poetry, W.B. Yeats. It's from 1916. The first line comes, all changed utterly, a terrible beauty is born. He's talking about Irish Revolution. Now, terrible beauty does not mean horrible beauty. Terrible means awesome, formidable, daunting. In my view, any beauty True beauty is never horrible, right? But it could be formidable.
Right.
Now, we are faced with terrible beauties almost on a daily basis. For instance, development has produced such great benefit to so many people in the world. In China, 800 million people lived out of poverty. And if you look at other countries, a lot of people are lifted out of poverty. And this is a great solution, achievement. What then? Give them power, electric power. They need mobility. They need safe drinking water. They need a better education for their kids. All of a sudden, you have to face with new challenges. Mm-hmm. But these new challenges means actually the result of your achievement. So I interpret terrible beauty that way. Right. So globalization, it's good, but it's awesome for some of these countries who's losing out on the competitiveness. What's the answer? Work hard. Try to be more competitive. This is W.B. Yeats, 1916. And then you asked me the question, how about your achievements? I said, no, remain humble. In Julius Caesar, California told her husband, Julius Caesar, that your wisdom has been consumed by confidence. Please, Shakespeare's confidence is overconfidence. Your wisdom has been consumed by overconfidence. So when we make achievements, don't be overconfident. You may make mistakes tomorrow, right? So let's keep this in mind. We keep ourselves sober. Whenever we make some achievement, try to remain humble and be prepared for possible mistakes moving forward. Mm-hmm. Finally, you refer to geopolitical issues, and I quote Coriolanus, the interpretation of times. This is very much important. Anything depends on a solution, but you solve a problem based on your interpretation of the times. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.